Easton left me, who was sick with a fever, in the suburbs just to accompany his first love to see the sea. He spent 6 years teaching me to be independent. However, he told his first love that she deserved to be loved by the whole world. So, I really didn't need him anymore. Belladonna shouted excitedly on the phone, "Easton, can you hear the sound of the waves?" Easton's face changed drastically and he slammed on the brakes. "Belladonna, where are you?" Belladonna chuckled softly. "I was in a really bad mood at first, but when I came to the seaside I felt a long-lost peace. Easton, the sea is so dark at night. I'm a bit scared. But when my feet sank into the sand I felt so down to earth. The seawater is so cold that I'm feeling a bit chilly now." "Cold? Then how about I take you to eat hot pot? That one where you said the tripe was especially delicious." Easton's voice was steady, but his hand holding the phone was shaking. Finally, he found the blinking red dot indicating Belladonna's location on the map. He wanted to turn the car around, but I pressed his hand. Only then did Easton remember that I was still in the car. Because of my obstruction, his face looked a bit unpleasant and his gaze subconsciously became fierce. I smiled helplessly and pressed the mute button on the call interface. "Let me get out of the car first. I still need to go to the hospital. I had a fever, 38.9 degrees Celsius. We left the friends gathering early just to send me to the hospital." But just one call from Belladonna made Easton forget my existence. Easton was in a dilemma. Astrid, Belladonna, she. I knew what Easton wanted to say. It was nothing more than that Belladonna's situation was more urgent and she needed him more. And I was just sick with a fever. I wasn't a child. Couldn't I handle it by myself? Before he could finish speaking, I nodded understandingly. "I understand. Go find her. I'll go to the hospital by myself." After saying that, I got out of the car. I watched the car stay still for 5 seconds, then turn around and speed away. Belladonna was Easton's first love. In college, in order to win her over, Easton, who was allergic to mangoes, forced himself to eat a whole box of mangoes. But in the end, Belladonna abandoned him for a better option, which made Easton fall into self-contempt for a while. I didn't save him. When I met him, he had already walked out of the pain of being dumped. At that time, he was confident, mature, steady, and reserved. He used to be my life mentor. He helped me become a better person. Just not in the way I liked. Belladonna suddenly reappeared 2 years ago. The so-called better option she chose not only cheated on her but also physically abused her. Belladonna became depressed, severely depressed. Easton was her psychologist. He said that he had already let go and that Belladonna was just a patient to him at present. It was indeed like that at the beginning. Until Belladonna stopped paying. Until Easton said affectionately to her one night, "You deserve to be loved by the whole world." Today was the birthday banquet of Easton's friend. In order to have a good time, he found a farmhouse in the suburbs. The environment was really nice and there were all kinds of entertainment projects. It's just that the location was too remote. 10 minutes passed and still no one accepted the order on the taxi hailing app. And I could hardly stand because of the fever. I squatted by the roadside, hesitating whether to call 120. Suddenly, a car drove over from a distance. "Astrid? Why are you here?" I squinted to recognize. It seemed to be one of Easton's childhood friends. "Asher?" He got out of the car and helped me up. "What's going on? Where's Easton?" I didn't want to publicize what Easton had done, so I just begged, "Can you take me to the hospital? I might not be able to hold on." It wasn't a lie when I said I couldn't hold on. As soon as I got in the car, I felt dizzy and closed my eyes. In a daze, I heard Asher calling Easton. He said, "Even if you have something to do, even if Belladonna is going to jump into the sea and commit suicide the next second, you could have called us. Any of us could have taken your wife to the hospital. If I hadn't left temporarily, she would have passed out by the roadside with no one taking care of her. Isn't she a child?" "Of course she isn't. But did you forget this is the suburbs? Could she conjure up a car?" "Easton, you're such a bastard. Damn it." Although Easton's behavior didn't have a big impact on me, I couldn't help but curl the corners of my mouth when I heard someone standing up for me. Maybe because I relaxed, I fell asleep for the rest of the journey. I woke up in the middle of the night. There was no message or missed call from Easton on my phone. Instead, Asher sent me a text message, "I'm Asher. I had something to do and left. I hired a nurse for you. Let me know you're okay when you wake up." So I replied to him, "I'm awake. I'm okay. Thank you." After thinking about it, I added another sentence, "I'll treat you to dinner when I have time." I didn't leave the hospital until I finished the infusion the next morning. I asked for a day off from the company and went directly to my friend's law firm. My friend's subordinate received me. He handed me the divorce agreement and said to me, "If you need to file a lawsuit, you can contact me at any time." I thought it shouldn't be necessary. But I still nodded and thanked him. When I got home, Easton wasn't there. Judging from the furnishings at home, he hadn't come back all night. I didn't call him. I took out my suitcase and started packing my things. There were fewer and fewer things of mine in this house. There were only 3 pairs of shoes left in the shoe cabinet, and only the clothes of this season were left in the wardrobe. I had already emptied the study. Last week, I moved all my computers and documents to my new home. As for other daily necessities, instead of taking the trouble to move them, it was better to dispose of them. I made 8 round trips to throw away all the things. I just stood in the living room with a suitcase, waiting for Easton. He arrived home at about 6 o'clock. Seeing the suitcase, he was stunned for a moment. "Are you going on a business trip?" I said, "No, I'm moving out." "What do you mean?" "I took out the divorce agreement. Let's get divorced." Easton paused for a few seconds and then pushed me away impatiently. "Stop making trouble. I haven't slept all night and I'm already tired enough." I tried my best to make my tone calm. "I'm not making trouble. Take a look. If you're not satisfied with anything, we can discuss it again." "Are you serious?" "Yes." Easton sneered. "Astrid, are you threatening me? A mature adult shouldn't do such a thing. Divorce? Running away from home? You're not a child anymore." I had heard similar words too many times. At first, I blamed myself. Later, I was angry. Now, I didn't feel anything. I insisted on handing the divorce agreement to him. "Take a look. If there's no problem, sign at the end." "Astrid, that's enough." Easton growled. He said, "If you keep doing this, I'll take it seriously." I silently stared at him. Finally, he angrily looked away. He snatched the divorce agreement from my hand, didn't even look at it, and directly flipped to the end and signed his name. He angrily told me to get out. But I still reminded him, "Meet me at the Civil Affairs Bureau at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." Easton and I met through a blind date. At that time, I had just turned 20 and hadn't graduated from college yet. I went just for fun. When I saw Easton, I was amazed by his appearance. I couldn't help sighing, "Is the quality in the blind date market so high nowadays?" Easton burst out laughing. We both knew that neither of us had that intention, so we exchanged a few pleasantries, left each other our phone numbers, and then went our separate ways. I called Easton 3 months later because he was a psychologist. "Dr. Easton, I'd like to ask you. If I heard my toothbrush talking to me, what do you think that means?" Easton said, "It means you need to see me." On that day, I had a lot of examinations and evaluations, and Easton led me through them all the time. Later, he told me, "You're sick and you need to take medicine." "But I don't think I'm sick." Easton chuckled, "You will feel that you are after taking the medicine for a while." That was a period when I relied on Easton a lot. He was very patient. He smiled gently and told me, "It's okay. It's just a minor problem. I can cure it." He took 1 year to cure me, and I took half a year to win his heart. Then we fell in love, got married, and it had been 6 years until now. We hadn't even reached the 7-year itch yet, but our relationship had already come to an end. But fortunately, I had already let it go. I took a picture of the divorce agreement and then posted it on Moments. First to react was my mom. Phone calls came one after another, and messages flooded in. I quickly glanced at them. The words in them were either cheap or shameless. To avoid having a heart attack and going to the hospital, I directly blocked her. Sure enough, the world became quiet. The next second, Ivy's call came in. She was my best girlfriend now. She was also the first person to know that I was getting divorced. She said, "I know you really want to get divorced, but isn't it a bit too early to celebrate now?" I smiled, "It's not to celebrate. I posted it for Easton to see." "What do you mean?" "He might think that I'm just being angry. If I don't push him, he won't go to the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow." Easton was 6 years older than me. My mom once said that a 6-year age gap between a man and a woman was not good. There was a conflict between the Chinese zodiac signs, which was unlucky. But Easton's conditions were so good that they directly defeated the feudal superstition and made my mom think that I must have accumulated good deeds in my previous life. Because of the 6-year age gap, Easton always treated me like a child. When he was nice to me, he took care of me like a child. When he was not nice to me, he also reprimanded me like a child, but the sentence he always said was, "You're not a child anymore." My Moments post worked. The next morning, when I arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau, Easton was already standing there. However, he wasn't alone. Belladonna was there too. She looked at me with a helpless expression. "I was shocked when I heard from Easton that you two were getting divorced." "Astrid, you can't be so impulsive. If it's because of what happened the night before last, I'll apologize to you, okay?" It was rather ridiculous. She used a tone like coaxing a child, but the provocation in her eyes couldn't be hidden. I curved the corners of my mouth, "Then go ahead and apologize." "What? Apologize? Didn't you say you were going to apologize?" Belladonna was startled. But she reacted quickly. She grasped Easton's wrist. "It seems that Astrid is really angry. Easton, quickly say something for me." Easton had a cold face. "Is she a child? Does she need to be coaxed?" "Easton, don't be like this. Didn't you promise me that you would have a good talk with Astrid? Astrid. I interrupted her. Belladonna, I'm really curious. You always call me Astrid. Are we that familiar? Belladonna's face turned pale. Easton gave a low shout. Astrid, where's your politeness? I was a bit annoyed. If I remember correctly, the purpose of today is to get the divorce certificate. So, Easton, are you stalling for time? Easton's face darkened. Stubborn. We entered the Civil Affairs Bureau one after another. After finishing the divorce registration, the staff reminded us to come to get the divorce certificate 1 month later. After coming out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Easton asked me, when are you going to collect your things? I looked at him in surprise. Didn't you notice? Notice what? There's nothing of mine left in that house. In fact, it's understandable that Easton didn't notice. In the 2nd year of our marriage, he proposed that we sleep in separate rooms. He said, even as a couple, we need our own independent space so that such a relationship between the two sexes can last long. At that time, I really trusted him. Even though I would rather share the same bed with him, I still agreed. Since then, even when we had sexual relations once a week, he would get up and leave after it was over. I pulled him back several times and asked him coquettishly if he could stay with me. He always looked at me as if I were a naughty child. Astrid, we should keep our word. We can't break our promises. Later, once, his friends came to our house to play. They accidentally found out that Easton was sleeping in the guest room. One of them teased Easton, asking if I had driven him there. Easton said, I was the one who proposed sleeping in separate rooms. Why? She's too clingy. It's a bit annoying. I wasn't surprised that my mother would come to make a scene. I had told her the address of our new house. It wasn't because of our deep mother-daughter bond, it was just that I knew her well. If she couldn't find where I lived, she would make a fuss at my company. If she couldn't find me at the company either, she would go to Easton. And Easton was the last person I wanted her to pester. Once when I was sick, Easton analyzed my mother for me, analyzing her motives for her actions and the real purpose behind them. My mother was like an open book in front of Easton. Her self-righteous little tricks could be seen through by Easton at a glance, and the kind of half-smiling expression Easton showed me after seeing through her made me uncomfortable. Is Easton going to divorce you? Did you do something to make him angry? Why are you so troublesome? How dare you post on Moments? Aren't you ashamed? I've told you to have a baby quickly. You're almost 30 and still don't have a baby. Why are you so useless? Why am I so unlucky? Whenever I go out, others say you're infertile. Can't you make me proud? I can't eat well or sleep well every day now, and I don't even have the mood to play cards. I don't care. You go and have a good talk with Easton. If you dare to divorce him, I won't recognize you as my daughter. I had heard the same set of words countless times and they could no longer arouse my negative emotions long ago. But I still couldn't help asking her, don't you care why we're getting divorced? Why? What why? You can't even keep your man. How dare you ask why? Astrid, I'm telling you, if you dare to divorce him, don't call me mother anymore. I complied readily. Okay, Auntie. My mother was stunned for a few seconds and then screamed, Astrid. She looked as if she was having a heart attack because I had provoked her. You just can't bear to see me happy, can you? Do you just want to make me angry to death? What have I ever done wrong to you? I brought you up with so much effort. Is this how you repay me? You're trying to drive me to death. I looked at the hysterical roaring woman in front of me. In fact, she didn't have a complete set of values. She didn't know clearly what should be done and what shouldn't be done. Now she was acting as if divorce was a heinous crime. But it was also her who asked for 50,000 yuan when my boss tried to take advantage of me. That was the summer job she found for me. It was a real estate development company and the boss was my father's high school classmate when he was alive. She asked me to go there and learn from the financial staff. I went, and that man whom I could call uncle blocked me in the car after getting drunk once. He said that if I was willing, we could go to a hotel right away and he would give me 5,000 yuan a month. I was terrified. I told my mother about it tremblingly. She was silent for a long time. 5,000 is too little. Tell him 50,000. If he agrees to raise it to 50,000, then you can accept it. At that moment, I was numb. I numbly resigned and numbly went back to school. But she wouldn't let me go. She forced me to go back to that company, saying that if I didn't hand over the work properly, how could she face that man in the future? That man who tried to take advantage of me. It was also at that time that I became Easton's patient because of severe depression. I took a kitchen knife from the kitchen and threw it in front of my mother. She shrank her neck and immediately fell silent. What are you doing? I said, it's up to you. Kill yourself or stab me. As long as you're happy. But I'm definitely getting divorced. There was a deathly silence. My mother looked at me with a bit of fear in her eyes. Oh, using a knife is too ugly. I dragged her to the window. Shall we jump down together? Anyway, you don't want to live either. I'll give you back your life. My mother fled in a panic. When she reached the door, she said viciously, "If you want to die, die by yourself. Don't drag me down." Finally, the world was quiet. I lay down on the floor. I emptied my mind and actually fell asleep like that. I was woken up by Easton's phone call. He asked me, "What should we do with the bags and jewelry in your display cabinet?" It took me a while to figure out what he was talking about. "They were all given by you. Now I'll return them to you." Easton said coldly, "There's no reason for me to take back the things I gave away. Then just throw them away." After saying that, I hung up the phone. I wanted to block Easton. But when I thought that we still needed to contact each other when getting the divorce certificate, I gave up. I thought that with Easton's personality, once he hit a wall with me, he wouldn't take the initiative again. However, to my surprise, on the fourth day, he called me again. At that time, I was fulfilling my promise to treat Asher to dinner. Asher seemed quite aloof and cold at first glance, but when we actually got along, I found that he was quite gentle. His gentleness was different from Easton's. Easton's gentleness was only on the surface, and his heart was cold. While Asher had a kind of depth that came with the passage of time. I expressed my gratitude to him. He asked me how my health was recovering. Then we talked about our jobs. He was a bit surprised to hear that I was now working in a tax firm. I smiled and said, "I passed the certified public accountant exam 2 years ago and then changed jobs." Asher nodded and said, "That's amazing." He added, "Easton is really blind." I lowered my eyes. I guess he still doesn't know that I've changed jobs until now. In Easton's eyes, I had always been useless. Just like when I told him that I wanted to take the CPA exam. His reaction was, "Don't waste your time on things beyond your ability." Asher wasn't a gossipy person, and the topic was quickly dropped. We chatted casually for a few more sentences and then finished our dinner. When we walked out of the restaurant, Easton called. He asked me, "Where's the body wash at home?" I was silent. Suddenly, Belladonna's voice came from the other end. "Forget it. Why are you really calling Astrid? What if she gets the wrong idea? I won't take a bath." I chuckled and said, "There's body wash on the bottom layer of the storage cabinet, and the bathrobe is on the top. Have fun." "Wait." Easton's voice was urgent. "Don't think too much. Belladonna and I were having dinner nearby, and the waiter accidentally spilled soup on her." "You?" I wanted to say, "You don't need to explain to me." Suddenly, I missed a step and almost fell. Fortunately, Asher held me. He said, "Be careful." Easton fell silent. After a few seconds, he growled, "Who are you with?" I frowned listlessly. "We're already divorced. We have nothing to do with each other in marriage, funerals, or anything else." Asher said, "If you need, I can explain it to Easton." I looked at him and asked, "Don't you believe that I'm really going to divorce him?" Asher looked at me for a long time. Finally, he said, "I believe you." I curved my lips and said, "Thank you." I thought I had made myself clear enough. But Easton started bombarding me with phone calls. He even found my home. When Asher sent me to the entrance of the community, Easton rushed out of the car and raised his fist to hit Asher in the face. "I regarded you as a brother, and you're seducing my wife?" Asher took the blow. Easton still wanted to hit him again, but Asher grabbed him and restrained him. He said, "Enough." I rushed over and pushed Easton away. "What's wrong with you?" Easton looked at me in disbelief. "You're protecting him?" I gritted my teeth and said, "You're crazy." Belladonna arrived late. She took Easton's hand and looked at me disapprovingly. "Astrid, you're being willful. Even if you're angry, you shouldn't try to drive a wedge between Easton and Asher's brotherly relationship." Asher sneered coldly. "Asher? Am I that familiar with you?" Belladonna's face turned pale. "As? Asher, I know you don't like me. If you know I don't like you, then don't say anything." "Enough." Easton always subconsciously protected Belladonna. He took a step forward and stood in front of Belladonna, looking coldly at Asher. "Since when did you two start?" I let out a long sigh of frustration. "Easton, don't think everything is dirty just because you're dirty." Belladonna interrupted, "But you got out of Asher's passenger seat. Isn't the passenger seat only for girlfriends?" I tilted my head and looked at her. "So you know that?" Belladonna looked aggrieved. I'm carsick." Listen to her. She can do whatever she wants, but others can't. Everyone could see that she was being unreasonable and making excuses, but only Easton was blind to it. I looked at Easton tiredly. "What on earth do you want? Why can't you just leave me alone? Do I deserve to be tortured by you?" Easton looked confused. "Tortured? You say I'm torturing you?" I had a blank expression and said, "How did you know where I live? You asked my mother, right? You know my mother better than I do. You clearly know that as long as you take the initiative to find her, she'll think there's still hope for us. She'll come to bother me again and again. But you don't care because how to deal with the relationship between me and my mother is my own business and has nothing to do with you." These were the exact words Easton said to me. "That's your mother?" You have to learn to deal with your relationship with her by yourself instead of asking me every time. Otherwise, what's the point of my treating you for so long? But what about her? I pointed at Belladonna. You can help her deal with everything. Her interactions with friends and family were all taught by you hand in hand. Why is it like this? Because in your eyes, Easton, she, Belladonna, deserves to be loved by the whole world while I, Astrid, deserve to bear everything by myself. I've borne it. Easton, you've taught me to fight against the whole world alone, so I don't need you anymore. Because of Easton and Belladonna, Asher was brought to my home for no reason. However, he didn't go inside. He just said to me at the door, "Have a good rest. Good night." I felt a bit sorry for him. But I was too tired, both physically and mentally. I didn't even have the strength to speak. In the end, I could only nod and watch him leave. Easton wanted to have a talk with me. I agreed. We met again in his studio. It was at my request. I hoped that my conversation with him could be more rational. Easton still had that superior air about him. He said, "I admit I was wrong this time. I shouldn't have left you and gone to Belladonna. It's just that Belladonna's situation was so urgent at that time. I was afraid that she might do something stupid. It was a matter of life and I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. She's my patient and you should understand. But I promise you that I'll handle my relationship with her properly." This was just like Easton. Give a slap and then a sweet. I thought for a while. About half a year ago, Belladonna had a rear-end collision and called you. You had stayed up all night the previous night, but when you received Belladonna's call, you rushed over there in a hurry. Afterwards, you explained to me that Belladonna had no other choice and that apart from you, she had no one else to turn to. Easton frowned. What are you trying to say? I want to ask you, if it had been me who had the rear-end collision, would you have gone? Of course Easton got stuck. He should also have remembered what happened a month ago. Because the coolant pipe was aged and broke, the engine of the car blew up halfway. That day, since my car was sent for maintenance, I was driving his car, and naturally I wanted to ask him what to do. He said, "Call the police if you're attacked, dial 120 if you're sick, and contact the garage if there's something wrong with the car." Astrid, it's common sense. Easton took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose irritably. Astrid, be reasonable. I said that on that day because we had quarreled the night before. I nodded. Yes, we quarreled. So, as long as I don't admit my mistake and bow my head, you'll punish me in every way. Shouldn't one admit one's mistake when one has done something wrong? I stood up abruptly. The biggest mistake I've ever made in my life is marrying you. Easton grabbed me. What on earth do you want? I looked at him coldly. I want you not to go back on your word when the 1-month period is up. The boldest thing I've ever done in my life was to pursue Easton. He helped me when I was most helpless. To such an extent that I once felt that I couldn't live without him. That was the first time I experienced what it was like to be lovesick and lose my appetite. During the days when I couldn't see Easton, I visibly became haggard. I didn't know what was wrong with me. All I knew was that I wanted to be with him. I was really a lovesick fool back then. I was clingy, jealous, and suspicious. These were all things that Easton didn't like. So he broke me bit by bit and then reshaped me. Time passed quickly when Easton didn't come to find me. I went on 2 business trips. When I came back, the guard told me that my mother had come to look for me 3 times, but they had stopped her each time. Belladonna somehow got my phone number and sent me a message accusing me, "Because of you, Easton and Asher have completely fallen out. Are you satisfied now?" I didn't want to pay attention to someone who didn't know what she was talking about, but I still called Asher. "If you need, I can explain to Easton." Instead of answering, Asher asked, "Do you need it?" "No. I don't need it either." I fell silent. Asher said, "Just got back from a business trip? How did you know?" He said, "I went to your firm to look for you. Anything the matter? The accountant in the subordinate branch company suddenly wants to leave, and we can't find a suitable replacement for the time being. I was wondering if you'd like to do the bookkeeping on a temporary basis." I said, "I'm quite expensive." Asher gave a low laugh. "I'll try my best. I should be able to afford it." I also smiled. "Okay, I'll come to talk to you in detail tomorrow." "Okay." After hanging up the phone, I thought that I must have been mistaken. The conversation with Asher was very pleasant. That branch company didn't have much business, and it was more cost-effective to outsource the bookkeeping. After agreeing on the price, we signed the contract. Asher raised his wrist and glanced at the time. "I have another meeting coming up, so I won't keep you any longer." I breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that I was indeed mistaken. "Okay, you're busy." Easton came to find me again on the 12th day. He looked a bit dejected. He said, "You've changed jobs, and you didn't even tell me." I frowned. "What exactly do you want?" Easton looked at me. "Are you really determined to get a divorce?" "What else?" "Why?" Ivy often said that in my relationship with Easton, although he was 6 years older than me, it was me who was spoiling him. Whatever Easton wanted, I satisfied him. Whatever Easton asked for, I did it for him. So he became unscrupulous and at the same time lost the ability to reflect. One last time, let's talk. This time it was me who spoke. I said to Easton, I told you before. I told you when I was taking the CPA exam, but you bluntly said that I wouldn't pass. I also told you when I changed jobs, but you didn't believe me and thought I was daydreaming. Even when it came to buying a house, I didn't hide it from you. I started decorating the new house last year and I started moving things 2 months ago, all right under your nose. Why don't you ask yourself why you couldn't see or hear these things? Easton was at a loss. But you weren't like this before, I sneered. Thanks to you. My mother is not a good life mentor. She has never told me what to do and what not to do, nor has she ever taught me about propriety, righteousness, honesty, and shame. I figured all those things out by myself through trial and error. So my values formed quite late. When I first got together with Easton, he would always shake his head in disappointment and sigh, how come you don't even know these things? How did your family teach you? If it were me now hearing such words, I would surely counter them calmly. But back then, I really felt ashamed and thought that I was in the wrong. You've told me a lot of principles and have always demanded that I meet the standards of a saint. I couldn't be weak, couldn't have negative emotions, and couldn't turn to you for help. Every word that came out of my mouth had to be positive. I couldn't speak ill of others, couldn't complain about dissatisfaction with work, couldn't lack common sense in life, and couldn't be content with pleasure. You were always criticizing me, shattering my self-esteem bit by bit and throwing it on the ground. Easton, you know what? I once thought about committing suicide because it was so painful. I even went to pray to the Buddha. I drew a lot, and I've forgotten what was written on it and what the fortune teller said. All I remember is that I kept crying as if I had cried out all the tears in my lifetime. Easton turned pale, his lips trembling as he stammered, "You're my wife. I just hoped that you could become better." Easton, you're a psychologist. Why don't you use your professional knowledge to think about whether what you did to me in the past counts as PUA? I raised my hand to stop him. Think about it. Think about it carefully first. Easton once shattered my self-esteem bit by bit. It was I who picked up the pieces one by one. Then I patched them up and became the person I am now. On the 18th day, Easton showed up downstairs in my apartment. He called me. I'm wrong. I'll change. Will you forgive me? I won't contact Belladonna anymore and I won't do those things you don't like. What do I have to do for you to forgive me? Then how about I give you my life? Okay? He brought mangoes, a whole box of them. He swallowed them one by one voraciously. His lips, cheeks started to swell and turn red, and visible rashes appeared on his exposed arms. He didn't stop. 1, 2, 3. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was already having difficulty breathing. I didn't show up until he was dragged into the ambulance. The expectant light in his eyes slowly dimmed. Then he closed his eyes and passed out. The first person who came to me about this was Belladonna. The jealousy in her eyes could hardly be concealed. Why? He obviously still loves me. That was clearly his proof of love for me. You two were clearly about to get divorced. Astrid, what on earth did you do? I looked at Belladonna. Actually, I've always hated you but I've never stopped you from contacting Easton. Do you know why? I asked and answered myself, because your appearance saved me. Because of Belladonna's appearance and because of the look of disappointment on Easton's face when he looked at Belladonna. Suddenly, I realized that Easton was just an ordinary person after all. He wasn't the god I had placed on a pedestal. He was a bit dirty. The second person who came to me was my mother. She didn't understand. Easton has gone this far. What else do you want? You've been playing hard to get for long enough. He's already given you a way out. Why don't you take it? I didn't understand either. Easton has always hoped that I would cut off contact with you and demanded that I stop supporting you. Do you still want me to be with him? My mother's face changed, and she turned and ran away. The third person who came to me was Asher. I thought it was also about Easton. But he said, on a business trip? We rushed to the branch company overnight, did the job handover with the accountant who was about to go abroad, and went over the accounts in hand again. Due to time constraints, we had to stay there. Asher said mysteriously that he would take me out to have fun. After taking many twists and turns, we arrived in front of a group of ancient-style buildings. I thought it was some ancient town tourist project. But Asher told me that it was a street full of quiet bars. Here? Is there any business? Asher sighed. If I had heard you say this earlier, I wouldn't have invested either. He lamented that he had been influenced by his bad friends, and without realizing it, he had made a losing business. He didn't make any money, but he had developed excellent bartending skills. I sat in front of the bar and watched him perform a smooth series of operations. The only 2 guests in the bar came over and asked him to make a drink for them too. Asher smiled and pushed the glass in front of me. Sorry, it's for exclusive use. That night, Asher became my exclusive bartender. I drank quite a lot, a bit tipsy but not drunk. The music in the bar was just right, the temperature was just right, and even the wind blowing in through the half-open window was just right. Scarlett opened the door and sat casually on the corner of the sofa in the living room. The light flickered on her face, giving her a somewhat enchanting look. I went. When he saw me, he smiled, but it was a rather ugly smile. So all this time, you didn't block me, were willing to see me, and talk to me just because you were afraid that I would go back on my word, right? I nodded. He asked again, do you hate me very much? I answered honestly. Yes, I did hate you. There was a period of time when I really hated Easton. I hated meeting him. I hated that I loved him. However, later, as I took the Certified Public Accountant, CPA, exams and changed jobs, I gradually let it go. I said to Easton, I know myself well. If I could do it all over again, I would definitely make the same choice. The 20-year-old Astrid needed Easton. It didn't matter if it was you or some other Easton. Would I have lived a better life if I had been with someone else? No. I was really in a bad state back then because I was overly dependent on others. But fortunately, you pushed me away. Although the process was painful, fortunately, the result was what I wanted. Easton, I don't hate you anymore. It's not that you're not worthy of being hated, but that I don't want to dwell on the past. But similarly, I won't forgive you either. Now, I just want to leave. Easton did what he said. He didn't regret it. We successfully got the divorce certificate. He asked me, can we still be friends in the future? I couldn't help laughing, you're a psychologist. What do you think? I've always remembered a sentence Easton once said, the past can't be changed, but the future holds infinite possibilities. People always have to grow up. It doesn't matter if you stumble and fall, or even get bruised all over. Don't look back. Just move forward. After the divorce, I resolutely blocked and deleted Easton without hesitation. Among the people related to him, the only one I kept was Asher. For months after the divorce, Asher told me that Easton had been reported. The reason for the report was that he had an ambiguous relationship with a patient. The whistleblower was Belladonna. Because the reported materials were untrue, Easton wasn't really affected, but Belladonna didn't give up. She directly pulled out all the stops and said that Easton had seduced her during her treatment. She showed their chat records, photos of them hugging each other, and a video of them kissing during a couple's half-price activity in a store. Asher didn't seem to expect that there would be such detailed content in the news. He was in a flurry to turn off his phone. I said calmly, I already knew about it all. He fell silent. I smiled bitterly, do you want to ask why I knew about it but didn't leave him immediately? I didn't. I interrupted him, at that time, I was trying to break free from the shackles on me. If I wanted to escape, I had to first unlock the chains binding my limbs. But I was so useless. I couldn't find the key. So I could only break my limbs. The sudden silence around us was really awkward. Just as I was thinking about saying something to break the silence, Asher patted me on the shoulder. You're already amazing. I worked for Asher for a year until he found a suitable accountant again. During this year, we would go to the branch office once a month. On that day of each month, he would mix drinks for me. He paid me quite generously. In return, I also invited him to dinner many times. Somehow, we became friends. Ivy asked me if he was trying to court me. I shook my head, I don't think so. Then do you like him? I was a bit confused, I haven't thought about it. I don't think I like him. Ivy shook her head, I advise you not to set assumptions for yourself. Because of Belladonna's report, Easton was fired. There was a stain on his resume, and it was very difficult for him to find a good job again. But even at this point, he still refused to be with Belladonna. Finally, Belladonna, who had failed, gave up. I heard that Easton started doing business, but he didn't do very well. My best friend asked me if I was happy about it. I nodded, I'm quite happy. I would give my mother alimony every month, but I didn't see her often. She said that I was narrow-minded and still held grudges. I just let it pass when I heard it. I would still support her in her old age. But I took back all my feelings for her, whether it was love or hate. This state made me feel very comfortable. My birthday was at the end of the year. Because I didn't have many friends and I was at this age, I didn't have any expectations for my birthday. But Asher invited me to dinner. He celebrated my birthday for me. There were dishes I liked and my favorite cake on the table. He gave me 2 gifts. One was to wish me a happy birthday. The other was to ask me to be his girlfriend. I promised to be happy and also agreed to be his girlfriend. Ivy clicked her tongue, is that it? Didn't he even court you? I smiled, I like being with him. Adult love has our own tacit understanding. It doesn't need to be earth-shattering or full of vows. As long as we're suitable for each other, that's enough. But I still couldn't help asking Asher, when did you start liking me? I wasn't so conceited as to think that he had been secretly in love with me for years. But I always felt that he had been nice to me since a long time ago. Asher thought for a while. He said, at first, I didn't have a deep impression of you. I just thought you were Easton's little wife, small in stature, young, didn't talk much, but very well behaved. It wasn't until one time when I accompanied my mother to burn incense at the temple. Asher was impatient with such things. While his mother went to listen to the chanting of scriptures, he wandered around bored. Then he ran into Astrid. Astrid was crying bitterly. Asher's first reaction was to avoid her. Nobody would want their embarrassing state to be seen by someone they knew, but in the end, he didn't leave. Because Astrid was crying so sadly. Those sobs, curling herself up like that, as if she had been tortured to the bone. Asher took a picture and wanted to send it to Easton to let him handle it. But in the end, he didn't send it. She was Easton's wife. If she could get comfort from Easton, would she come to the temple to cry? Asher thought, forget it. Don't do unnecessary things. But in the end, he did something. He bought a pack of tissues and handed them to Astrid, but he was at a loss for words and finally could only say 3 words, stop crying. Astrid didn't remember who the person who handed her the tissues was. Asher, however, engraved the despair in her eyes firmly in his heart. At first, Asher didn't plan to do anything. He was a confirmed bachelor. He neither wanted to get married nor fall in love. It was too troublesome. Moreover, she was his friend's wife. But every time at gatherings, he would always pay more attention to her. He wanted to see if she was still so sad. And he also thought about whether he could do something to make her less sad. So in the KTV, he would pretend to casually ask the waiter to put the fruit plate on her side. At the dinner table, when the casserole of vermicelli she liked was about to be taken away, he would raise his hand to hold the turntable. However, there weren't many such opportunities. Asher thought, it doesn't matter. At least when I'm around, let her be a bit happier. None of these meant anything. He would also bring food for the stray cats downstairs. It was just something he did casually without any purpose. Until they started to get divorced. When Easton misunderstood them, he didn't explain. Firstly, he had become more and more dissatisfied with some of Easton's behaviors in the past 2 years. Secondly, he just wanted to show his attitude that this girl was quite pitiful and he stood by her. He hadn't thought that he would be with Astrid. He was a confirmed bachelor after all. Until a friend pointed it out to him, are you having a new kind of secret love? Was he secretly in love with Astrid? He was secretly in love with Astrid. It took Asher 2 days to face the reality. He gasped, I kind of want to get married. What's going on? Asher and Astrid got married in the 2nd year of their relationship. Easton also came. Asher stopped him outside. Forget it. On this happy day, don't make her unhappy. Easton cursed Asher for being hypocritical, saying that he had planned it for a long time, that he had ulterior motives, and that they had hooked up long ago. Asher sighed, if I wasn't afraid of wrinkling my wedding dress, I really wanted to punch you. Halfway there, he turned back and said to Easton, really not. Don't insult her. It seemed as if she had cheated during the marriage. That wouldn't do. Astrid was completely innocent. Astrid was the one who had been wronged. After marriage, Asher and Astrid had been living a life of just the two of them. Asher didn't want children. After being a confirmed bachelor, he found that he wanted to be a DINK, double income no kids. His mother said that he was always changing his mind on a whim. But she didn't force him either. After all, it was already a great thing that he was willing to get married. His mother thought, my daughter-in-law is 6 years younger than him. She should be able to take care of him until the end of his life. But actually, Asher was a bit nervous. He didn't want to hide it from Astrid, but he was also afraid that she wouldn't accept it. As a result, after hearing it, Astrid just said, oh, coincidentally, I don't want to have children either. Actually, Astrid was also hesitating about how to tell Asher. Getting married to someone but not having children with them didn't seem very kind, but she really didn't have the confidence to be a good mother. Her first half of life had been too messy. It was already a great fortune that she could heal herself in the second half of her life. The topic of a new life was too heavy. If she couldn't give a satisfactory answer, she would rather not answer it at all, but fortunately, the two of them reached an agreement. The only one who had some complaints about this was Ivy. Do you believe him? He used to be a confirmed bachelor. What if he wants children again one day? Men can have children at any time. Astrid was very calm about this. Your focus is wrong. The point is that I don't want to have children, and he happens to not want them either. So we have the same opinion and then got married. Whether he wants children or not is his will, and not being willing to have children is my stance. If we can agree, we'll stay together. If not, we'll separate. It's as simple as that. But isn't it sad? Astrid raised her head from the financial statements. Should we not start just because we're afraid of getting hurt and don't want to be sad? I can't live my whole life being timid. Hearing these words, Asher was quite happy. That little girl who cried bitterly, that little girl who was so sad, seemed to have grown up. No, she had been growing up all the time. Nobody could defeat her. The end.